we've been talking about 3 steps for handling rising anxiety and stress. And those 3 are ask, act, and accept. We've done videos now on each of those 3 things. Act is referring to, ask is referring to praying, turning right to the Lord to cast the anxiety on Him. Act is referring to, in those moments of rising stress and anxiety, asking, is there something I'm supposed to do? Is there something I can do, God wants me to do right now about this situation? And then accept is humbling ourselves under God's mighty hand, accepting His control over our path. So when I introduced this the first time, though, I added a 4th A down here at the bottom just to cause confusion, which is the word act again. And so this act is talking about, in the big picture, after I've asked, acted, and accepted. Now, I need to, here's another word we could use for it. I need to live. I need to get back to living. Sitting in my stress and anxiety isn't going to help at all. And so ask, act, accept. This is in a moment of rising stress and anxiety. But then in the big picture of life, now let's get back to living. Let's take godly actions to love and serve. And so what's so fascinating is that urban and suburban life in America recently, up until this crisis, was all about being too busy. Everybody was too busy all the time, almost like too busy living to be able to live. And we joked about stopping to smell the roses precisely because nobody had time to do so, despite the fact that stopping to smell roses would take a few seconds, probably. Now God has screeched many things to a halt, and usual sources of busyness have changed or gone away for many people. And that can feel like our chance to live is being kind of taken away. But what if it's actually the opposite in one sense? Before I get to the point, I want to make one other observation about that. And this is that before this crisis, when most people did stop to smell the roses, it consisted primarily of watching various forms of digital entertainment, games, movies, etc., and following sports in various ways. Those were kind of the dominant ways in which people would slow down and try to enjoy life a little bit. And I agree that those things can be roses from God that we can stop and smell. But my point is that it's worth asking, are those the only roses that God gave? Or in our busyness and in our pixel-driven culture, have we been missing some of God's best gifts that He gives both for our enjoyment and for our health? I'll just suggest, this is just a sample list, but I'll just suggest a few things. How about art, stories, poetry, music, relationships, including just conversation and laughter, physical activity, creativity, exploration, learning. These are examples of the kind of gifts God has given, blessings that we can enjoy in a broken world, but somehow through the busyness of modern life and the dominance of our pixelated entertainment, these wonderful gifts from God tend to just kind of drift into the background. I think we should take our opportunity now to revive them. 1 Timothy 6 says, "Instruct those who are rich in the present age not to be arrogant or to set their hope on the uncertainty of wealth, but on God, who richly provides us with all things to enjoy." That is very encouraging because it tells us that God richly provides us many things to enjoy that are unrelated to riches themselves. Riches may come or go, but God's enjoyable gifts, like these things, continue. And so even during a time when there is so much suffering and so many burdens, don't feel guilty about enjoying good gifts from God. You might even realize that you've been on the hamster wheel in some ways that mean you've been missing some of God's good gifts. These things will strengthen you and encourage you to be able to love God and love and serve other people well. So let's ask, act, and accept in those rising moments of anxiety, but then go back to living, including stopping to smell some of God's roses that He gave for our enjoyment and His glory.